What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. And today we're going to be talking about the Washington Capitals. And we're going to be talking about whether or not we think they're going to make the playoffs in the 2023-2024 NHL season. We've already done a video about this with the Detroit Red Wings. That video link will be in the description down below. But today it's about the Washington Capitals, and it's about the team that is just in a playoff spot right at the moment, with probably one of the most interesting, let's say, starts to the season or ends of the season that I think is going to be looked at in this NHL season. You have a team in Washington who, let's be honest, guys, like they're probably not supposed to be where they are, right? Like if you just look at their advanced statistics, 199 goals forward, their goals against is one of the, they're middle of the pack, but they're still pretty low. 229 goals against. They have a negative 30 goal differential. Like this is a team that is in the second wild card spot and is somehow in a playoff spot, despite the fact that they have probably one of the worst offensive cores in the league in terms of goals forward. So let's talk a little bit about this. Zach, just kind of give me your thoughts a little bit on Washington so far, and what your thoughts are just on their season, and how do you think they're going to do to kind of close out the year a little bit, and we can kind of jump into this.
Yeah, well, they started off pretty strong. They started off the season really strong. By I would say November, December, they were about a dozen games above 500.
Right.
It was not something that a lot of people expected, especially then, since Ovi didn't have the best goal scoring track record at that point in the season, and
Right.
just like they're in the same predicament now in terms of their goals scored. They were about 28th in the league in goals, and they had Charlie Lindgren stealing some games for them. But overall, they were not a team that thrived in any specific metric, in terms of power play, in terms of penalty kill, in terms of 5-on-5 chance creation. It was an anomaly. And, as you think what happened throughout an NHL season, you would think, okay, well, things are going to regulate themselves and this team is going to start losing as they should be. They went on a bit of on a stinker that began in January, actually, where they lost 9 out of 10 games, and you could have, and they fell almost down to 500 there. And then
Yeah.
people would have counted them out, right? At that point, their record fell to about 23 wins, 21 losses. This is February 13th. And you would think after that this team is not gonna recover from this at all. But they ended up winning still to this day most of their games, and now we're in a situation where they hold a wild card spot. They beat Detroit, the team directly competing with them on Thursday, I believe.
Yep.
They won that game in overtime, and they have a grip with about 10 games left in the regular season. They have a grip on the last wild card spot for the time being, and it's like, they're not necessarily thriving post January, but this is a team that somehow finds a way to win when they win most of their games. But however, when you can maybe touch on this, when they lose, they're losing big. Like these,
Yeah.
when they're losing, they're getting smoked, and it's not competitive. It's just interesting to see that a team that has a minus 30 goal differential, which is second worst in the Eastern Conference after the Columbus Blue Jackets,
Right.
team does not strive on any point specifically in their game is at the point where they are. So I'm very, very surprised about that.
Yeah, they're actually third worst in the NHL. The Montreal's got negative 46. But in terms of just like this team, like you mentioned it before, right? This is a team that, like, when they win, right? Like, if you look at just some of the results from February and March, right? They win a game 4-3, right? Then they win 6-2, they win 5-3. Okay, you can argue whatever. But then you go down, they beat Ottawa 6-3, they go lose 8-3 to Detroit. Then they win 5-2 to Philly, lose 5-2 to Arizona, right? Then they get shut out by the Jets. They lose 7-2 to the Oilers, right? And then they win 2 games 2-1, right? And then a 5-2 win against Calgary. And then they go lose 7-3 to Toronto, right? And then 7-6 against Carolina. That was a crazy game. 3-0 shutout again. 4-3 win against Detroit on Tuesday. and then a 5-1 loss to the Leafs last night. So this is a team, like you mentioned, that is finding ways to win, but they're also when losing, they get kind of, they get kind of blown up or blown out.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like you're almost like this is not a recipe for success, right? Because what you're essentially trying to say, or what you're essentially looking at, is you're looking at a team that's getting really good goaltending on certain nights, and because they're getting really good goaltending on certain nights, their goalie's stealing them games. Because right in the games that they're winning, like they're winning by 1 goal, 2 goals, sometimes 3 goals. But if you go look at like their goals against, they probably have like what, 2, 3 goals against, right? And they're scoring 4. And then the games that they lose, they're getting like 5, 6, 7, 8 goals against. And it's just not necessarily the recipe for success that's going to allow for a team that is battling for a playoff spot to continue that, well, for the end of the season, and also going into the playoffs, right? Like, this is a team that, yes, they have 36 wins on the year. Like, good for them. 27 losses, 9 overtime losses. Like, they're in the hunt. They're in the mix, right? And they have a very good home record. But they cannot score goals, right? 199 goals forward is only that number because of the fact that Ovechkin started scoring now, and he started becoming on a heater as of late, because there was a period where Ovechkin wasn't scoring. And so the Capitals had a worse goals forward because they weren't even relying on their best goal scorer to get the goals for them, right? And Ovechkin started picking it up as of late, so that number's been a little bit higher. But there was a period, like you mentioned, where they were 28th in the league, or something, even 29th in the league in goals forward. Like, that's just not good enough for a team to go into the playoffs. And like, just looking at some statistics here, like if you look at some of the guys on their team, right? Like Dylan Strom's got 60 points. That's a good season for him. Ovi's got 58. Nobody's complaining about that. But then after that, it just falls off, right? John Carlson, 45. Yeah, okay, he's their best defenseman. We know that. Anthony Manta's not even there anymore. He got traded at the deadline. Tom Wilson, only 32 points, right? Connor McMichael, 32 points.
Pacioretty's in the mix as well.
Pacioretty's at 19 points in 37 games. Only that 3 of them are goals, which is absolutely ridiculous, to be honest. The fact that he only has 3 goals. But, like, they don't have anybody playing wow, right? They have guys that are playing okay. McMichael's got 17 goals. Wilson's got 17 goals. But besides that, like, it's a whole lot of just a bunch of guys just not playing, let's say, up to standard, but they're winning games based solely on the fact that their goaltender, or let's be more specific and say Charlie Lindgren, is standing on his head, right? 5 shutouts, 911 save percentage, 21 wins, 13 losses, 5 overtime losses. Like, this is the reason they're in the playoffs, right? The reason they're in the playoffs is because Charlie Lindgren has had a fantastic season and has played some great hockey. Because you can't argue Darcy Kemper's played well. He's got 13 wins, 13 losses, 3 overtime losses, 888 save percentage, which means
that's also crazy to me, right? Because you look at Kemper was the guy supposed to be the starter this year.
Right.
He has 13 wins, 13 losses, under 900. So he's below the league average by some margin. And Lindgren is at a 911. It's not like this guy's at a 920, stealing games a la prime Carey Price here.
Right.
He's having great games here and there, but there's no metric that shows precisely what's happening. They know how to win games somehow.
It's weird. And it's like, it's one of those things too, where it's like, it's almost as if you're thinking about this, or I think about it, and I look at it from this perspective. Like, is this, let's say, a fluke of a season where it's like, because of everybody underperforming, like Pittsburgh, New Jersey, you could argue that the Islanders and the Red Wings are also kind of underperforming, and like Philly's not anywhere near them either, like only 82 points, 81 points. Like, is this just a situation of just the Eastern Conference not being, let's say, as strong for, let's say, the teams battling for the playoff spot, where Washington's getting lucky? Or is this just a situation where it's really that tight that every single point counts? Because I would argue that, like, none of the teams below them have necessarily shown that they want to make the playoffs either. Like, yes, I know the Islanders, are battling for it, and they won last night, and they're close on it. But like, Detroit's record as of late hasn't been good. Like, New Jersey's kind of been up and down all season, right? They're playing better lately, but still they've been up and down all season. And Pittsburgh's just a shit show, like, in themselves. So you have a bunch of just teams that are like kind of not really playing up to par, up to standard, and you have a Washington team that to be honest, yeah, they had that nine losses in 10 games in from the stretch in January, but since then they've kind of been a little bit consistent where they've won some, lost some. So they've been, let's say, mediocre, and they've still been able to find a way to be in this position, battling and playing meaningful games in April. So I'm just like I don't really know like what to say about Washington. Like I'm just surprised that they're in this position, given where the statistics are at, given the fact that Ovechkin didn't have a very good start to the year. Like bro, I think he had like 6
He had
goals
like
or
8
7
goals, I
goals.
think, going into it was like he had like 8 goals going into the new year, something
It
stupid like that.
it was like that doesn't, you know what I mean? Like when Ovechkin, if you ask anybody in anyone who watches hockey, if a team told you if Alex Ovechkin had 8 goals going into January, do you think the Washington Capitals will make the playoffs? Every single person would tell you no, right? Because
No,
it's
based on
not
the
normal,
history of the team and how
right?
they relied on him so much. But like I think I have somewhat of an explanation as to why they're in the position they're in still now going into the final stretch, is
Okay,
because track back to the beginning of the regular season, who are the teams you thought would compete with them for a wild card spot in their own division? There's New Jersey and there's Pittsburgh.
right,
Both those teams had high expectations. They have pretty strong rosters. Um, you know, New Jersey doesn't have the goaltending. That's why they're in the position they're in. But you'd expect those two teams to be basically the ones that would be battling out with them now at this point.
right.
But they're battling with Detroit, who is a mid hockey team. We established that in the last video.
Yeah,
And the Islanders, who are a so-so hockey team that rely a lot on Sorokin, and with a new coach and Patrick Roy adjustment mid-season, it's not like they're in such a good position now that they don't have to compete with Pittsburgh in New Jersey for that final wild card spot. And those team and the Islanders and the Wings are not particularly playing well right now. If you look at their record, it's projected on the screen for the last 10 games. They're both 3-6-1.
yep,
This does not scream like two teams that are gunning for a playoff spot. And Washington is winning 6 out of 10. They're winning 5 out of 10. And that's been good enough to put them in a good position because of how good their start was as well.
right.
Yeah, they're at 81 points right now. This is a team that they're probably going to end up with over 90. So if you compare it to previous seasons, it's not like points wise this is an anomaly. It's a team. The
No,
other teams are just they're underperforming, and that's what it is.
I would argue too, like looking at this and also looking at the fact, because you mentioned the last 10 games. I mean, Philadelphia's last 10 games are 3-5-2, and they're in third place in the wild card spot. So this could be a situation where Washington, right, could potentially finish not even in a wild card spot. They could finish third in the division, because that's how weak the Metro has been this year in terms of just the teams in that division. Like Carolina and the Rangers, we know, we know how good they are. They've been good all season. But after that, like you mentioned, right? Pittsburgh and New Jersey, I think, were expected to be better, and they haven't been. So teams like Washington and Philly, who have played, Philly's had good moments where they've played well, at stretches, and they've gotten good goaltending. But even a team like Washington, like these are two teams that at the beginning of the season were probably going to say, oh yeah, they'd probably battle for a spot, but I don't think they'd make it. And now both these teams are 3 and, let's argue 4 in the Metro, right? With an opportunity to potentially both teams making the playoffs, when in reality, they probably shouldn't really be in that position, because I don't think necessarily on paper they're good enough. But listen, that's the reality of the NHL. That's parity in the NHL, unfortunately. You're going to have stories that sometimes don't make sense. And that's kind of where we're at right now with these two teams. But I do want to kind of look at Washington's remaining games and just kind of see, like, some games that they're going to play, and some big games. I mean, they've got Boston coming up, and then they play 2 games against Buffalo and Pittsburgh, who are under them in the standings and still battling for a spot. You have Carolina and Ottawa after that, and then you play Detroit, Buffalo, Tampa, Boston, and Philly. They've got some tough games in that schedule, right? Boston twice, Tampa are not easy matchups. Carolina's not an easy matchup, and then they've also got some games against Pittsburgh and Buffalo twice, and then they also have to play one more game against Detroit, and the final day of the season, they got to play Philly. So realistically, like Washington could, kind of fall down over here a little bit, where they can, they're in a position where like we mentioned, they're playing better than the teams below them, but their schedule doesn't really favor them all too well. I know Buffalo's kind of struggled lately, but they're a team that can always play spoiler. Pittsburgh, I mean, they're whatever. Like, it's not really a big deal. And Ottawa's played better as of late, right? So this is a team like that needs to find a way to maybe win, I would say, 4 or 5 out of the remaining, let's say, 10 games that they have left, in order for them to have a chance at this play. If they go 5-5 on this stretch of 10 games, I think there's a shot that they make the playoffs. I think there's no way for them to miss out, because I think 5 wins, right, would put them at 91 points realistically from the 81 that they currently have right now.
Yeah.
So 91 points, I think, should be enough to make you win in the Metro, or win and make the playoffs, considering where Philly's at either. So that's where I would say, I think if they can win 5 games, they're in. But again, there's a couple of games against Detroit and Philly that are going to be determining factors into whether or not this team can do it. They've already beaten Detroit once, which was a huge win for them. Can they do it again on April 9th in Detroit? If they do, I think that's going to secure their playoff spot. But they also have to win games against some of the big teams. And sometimes it's not always easy to do that, especially at the end of the season, because those teams are trying to build momentum. So it's going to be interesting. I'm going to say 5-5 for them. I think they're going to win, maybe steal a game against, let's say, Carolina, and maybe one of the 2 games against Boston. And then they'll win, the 2 games against Buffalo, and they'll beat Detroit, but they'll lose every other game. That's what I'm going to say 5-5 for them. And if they can do 5-5, 91 points should be just enough for them to make the playoff. So that's where I'm at with the Caps. And I'm only saying that because I think Ovechkin's going to have, he's at 26 goals right now. I think in the next 10 games, I think he can probably score another 10. I think Obi could average a goal a game, maybe a little bit less than that. So let's say 9 or 8. If Obi can score 8 goals during the next 10 games, I think the Caps have a chance. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. And they get Tom Wilson back, right?
Yeah.
Suspension. So that's a big gain for them. But that's where, that's the only thing that makes sense to me. And then the only concern that I have is they're going to go into the playoffs and probably, if they play the Rangers in the first round, I think regardless of who they play, whether it's the Rangers or Carolina, I think they're going to get their ass kicked. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Caps. I look at how good the Rangers and Carolina are, and I'm like, I don't think the Capitals can compete with them for 7 games. I don't think so. But again, I've always told myself never to bet against Alex Ovechkin, because Ovechkin can turn it on at any moment. And if he turns it on, he's red hot. There's always a chance. But in the playoffs, you can't always rely on one player. You got to have a collective group that's able to help you win. And I don't think the Caps have that right now. But it would be a good story for them. I think it would be great for their fans, because playoff hockey is always fun. It's great for revenue. And I think it's going to show that, look, maybe they're not as far off as people thought they were. They've got some young, exciting players. Miroslav is a really good player. Hendrix Lapierre is showing he can be a good player, maybe a third-line center in the NHL. Connor McMichael's taking a step up this year. So they have, and Alexei Protas as well. So they've got guys that you can build around for the future, right? So their young guys are definitely developing, but they're not in the position, I think, yet where you can argue and say this is a team that can go far in the Stanley Cup final and be a legit cup contender. I think they're a team that is going to make it, and they're going to enjoy their cup of coffee in the playoffs. And then I think they're going to probably just lose in 5 or 6, or maybe even in 4. And they're going to call it a season. But it's not a failure for the Capitals if they go to the playoffs and get their ass kicked. I think just the fact that they made it in is already pretty impressive in themselves, just simply for the fact that I don't think people expected them to be there in the first place.
Yeah, I think the thing that benefits them the most with their remaining schedule is that they're not playing a Western team.
Right.
There won't be much traveling. They don't have to go on a cruel Western road trip at this point in the season, so they could be ready to go almost every night here. And those games against, particularly against Detroit, and Philly, those are proper 4-point games. Those teams are all close in points. That you win the game, you get your 2 points, and you prevent them from getting 2 points, and you basically, there's a differential factor there, and those games are very important for them. If this team does end up getting to the playoffs, which I think they do, I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't think they're gonna do. It looks like they won't do much damage against a powerhouse like the Rangers, but then again, a team that enters the playoffs that's not supposed to be there has nothing to lose,
That's
and
true.
that could be something that the group could definitely get behind here. So my prediction is that they will secure one of the wild card spots. There's a potential for them even getting the third spot in the Metro, but I think they're a lock for the playoffs. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one last thing. So yeah, they're a lock for the playoffs, but at the same time, I'm very fascinated to see how this season's gonna end. Like, there is so many teams that are from Philly down to probably New Jersey, where it's anyone's game, and that's what makes it more exciting. Like, we always. I feel like as hockey fans, you want a crazy playoff race because you want to be able to see like who's got the power to be able to go and actually do this, and who's got that dog in them to really be like, look, we got this, we're going to secure a playoff spot, let's do it, right? And the fact that there's probably like 5 teams that are battling for 2 spots in the Eastern Conference,
Yeah,
for the final wild card, and in some cases the Metro, right? Like, that's crazy, and I think it's going to be a really interesting end of the season. And whoever the 2 teams are that end up making it at the end of this, man, kudos to them for being able to do it. And I'm hoping that they end up getting into the playoffs and they're not just one and out. That's what I'm hoping. That, obviously, my opinion is that I think they will be, but if they can end up going to the playoffs and kind of pulling like some miracle or an upset, man, what a story that would be. So I love the story of it, and I hope that it's going to come down to the wire, and I'm hoping that it ends up being a good fight in the end, and make the best 2 teams, may the best 2 teams win. Let's say in that situation, and hopefully it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. So
well, they're going to be playing playoff hockey, and for all of these teams are going to be playing playoff hockey from now till if they end up playing in mid-April during the playoffs, then
yeah,
they're going to be basically until they're off to going back to their families, their kids, to playing golf. These couple of teams are going to be playing just from this point forward are playing playoff hockey essentially. And like Marc Bergevin used to always say as GM of the Habs, if you make it to the show, you always have a chance.
That's true. That's true.
That's why they never rebuild it when they should have had.
It's okay. It's okay. They're doing it properly now, and they made the Cup final in 2021, so it's always a memory that we're gonna have. But nonetheless, guys, thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like the video. Subscribe if you guys really enjoyed it, and check out our other videos. Zach, is there anything you want to add before we sign off?
Yeah, well, we shouted out our new sponsor in our last video, Triple Diamond Collectibles. They'll be in the description below for all future videos, so go ahead and check them out.
Thank you, guys. Peace.